For our first year Engineering Design Day project, we designed an educational computer game for kids in the kindergarten to 3rd grade range. Now, how did we end up with the fully functional computer game? First, we must take a look at the design cycle that we went through. To start the design process, we first needed to find out the problem, or in other words, the question that we're trying to solve. In our case, we asked ourselves, what age group do we want our educational computer game to cater to? What is the learning outcome we want them to achieve? We found answers to these questions by conducting research.
From what we found, a child's academic success in mathematics was largely determined by their proficiency in math in the early grades, especially during kindergarten. In other words, starting children with a strong foundation in math early on in their academic career would allow them to perform well in math later on. Because of this, we decided to target kids in kindergarten to 3rd grade. As for the learning objective, we found that math anxiety in young children is actually a common occurrence, and it prohibits them from achieving a higher level of mathematical thinking. So we decided to make it our goal to reduce math anxiety through our game. After we had a basic understanding of the general direction we wanted to take our educational computer game, the next step in the design process was brainstorming ideas of what the game should look like. Since our team name was B.A.K.E.R Games, which came from combining all our initials together, we decided to do a math game related to cooking.
The next part of the process was a planning stage, or more specifically for our case, storyboarding. This meant putting our ideas down on paper so we could figure out exactly what we wanted our end product to look like. It helped everyone figure out what was needed to be done, and how certain parts of the game should look like so we could each work separately on different parts and later pull everything into one unified game. The next step, and probably the most involved portion of the design cycle, is actually engineering the product. This meant figuring out how to create the game using GameMaker Studio. Some team members have worked on the artwork for the sprites in the game, and others worked on coding the game to a functioning state. Plenty of YouTube tutorials were utilized in finding out how GameMaker Studio works, as well as simply reading the documentation that came with the program.
After everything was put together, the final step in the design cycle was testing for any problems. That meant actually playing through the game and looking for flaws within the design. Sometimes the game would crash or something just wasn't quite right, so we made sure to fix as much as we could before FEDD Day. After that whole process, we finally finished our educational computer game, which was also a baking simulator at that point. One design challenge we faced was finding a good time for all 5 of us to meet. With 5 busy college schedules to handle, we managed to plan out specific times to meet just by communicating to each other when we were free. Another challenge was figuring out how to turn our ideas into the code that GameMaker Studio 2 uses. It just took a lot of trial and error, but at the same time, it was really frustrating to get certain functions of the game to work.
Our project did not win any awards in the competition, but the judges seemed pretty satisfied by our game. We received a score of 93 out of 100 on the rubric, so we did pretty well overall. A few teenagers even played our game, which was pretty entertaining to watch. We would probably get things done much earlier if we had to do it over. This would leave more room for testing as we kind of ran out of time towards the end, but thankfully we still were able to make it work. To any freshmen doing the FEDD project next year, the best advice we can give is to start on things as early as possible. The research component needs to be done as soon as possible to leave as much time for testing at the very end of the design cycle. Another piece of advice is to read and follow the rubric carefully, since you absolutely do not want to be disqualified over a misreading of the requirement. FEDD was a big learning experience for all of us, and we really enjoyed every single moment of it. Hopefully next year's FEDD projects will be even more creative.